My wife, Eleanor, had been traveling frequently for work lately. My private investigator's reports showed her entering and leaving a high-end apartment building with suspicious regularity. Bank statements confirmed monthly transfers to a private account. I had convinced myself she was supporting a lover on the side. But the evidence the detective delivered revealed something far more nauseating, a betrayal I hadn't even conceived of. Cancel all my afternoon meetings, I told my secretary, my voice flat. I hung up the phone and picked up the investigative report lying on my desk. I simply could not believe my eyes. My wife, Eleanor, transferring money to a private account every month, making frequent visits to a luxury apartment. Living in that apartment was a 10-year-old boy, a fourth grader at the private school owned by Eleanor's family, a boy named Leo Hayes. The timing lined up perfectly with the second year of our marriage, the period when Eleanor claimed to be studying abroad in the UK. I clenched my fists, a dull ache spreading through my chest. 12 years of marriage. I had believed I knew this woman inside and out. In the early days of building my company, she hadn't hesitated to invest her dowry to support me. When I told her I didn't want children, wanting to focus entirely on my career, she had agreed without question, even getting her tubes tied proactively. Facing pressure from both our families to have children, she had stepped forward, citing high work pressure and a lack of desire for motherhood. And now, a single, small photograph had shattered all my trust into irreparable fragments. After leaving the office, I didn't go home. I drove straight to a bar near my company, seeking refuge in the dim light and the promise of forgetfulness. After a few rounds of whiskey, my fingers, shaky despite the alcohol, dialed Eleanor's number. "Hello, Ethan." Her voice was still soft, familiar. "Are you coming home for dinner? I made your favorite soup." "Where are you?" I demanded, cutting straight to the point, my voice rougher than intended. "I'm at home, why?" "Who is Leo Hayes?" Silence crackled on the line. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing but the distant murmur of the bar filled the void. Then, an almost inaudible gasp. "Ethan," she said, her voice starting to tremble. "Can we talk about this face-to-face?" "Answer my question." Another heavy silence hung between us. "He's my son." Those 5 words felt like knives plunging into my heart, each one twisting. How utterly, sickeningly ironic. She admitted it. Her own mouth confirmed the unthinkable. "Who's his father?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, laced with a bitterness that made it hard to speak. "David Lynn, a university classmate. He's the financial director for the Hayes Group now," she said, her voice dropping lower, each word a confession. "Ethan, please, let me explain." I hung up the phone without another word. I signaled the bartender for another drink and downed it in one gulp, the burning liquid doing little to quench the fire raging inside me. I didn't get home until close to midnight. The lights were on, casting a warm, misleading glow. Eleanor sat on the sofa, her posture tense. Seeing me enter, she immediately rose, her face pale with apprehension. "Ethan, I want the truth," I stated, my voice cold and unwavering. "All of it. Now." I tossed the investigation report onto the coffee table, the papers scattering between us like debris from an explosion. She lowered her head, her hands twisting in her lap. She opened her mouth several times to speak, then stopped, the hesitation fueling my anger. 10 years ago, she finally began, her voice barely audible. "David's father. He had cancer. Only had a few months left." Her voice gained a little strength as the story unfolded. "The old man kept saying he wanted to hold a grandchild before he died. But David had just gone through a difficult divorce. He came to me, begged me to help him. He said if I would carry a child for him, he would raise the baby himself. He promised he would never interfere with my life, with our life." Eleanor looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate plea I had never seen before. I agreed. I thought it would just be this one time. I thought you wouldn't know, that you wouldn't be hurt." I scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. "So you pretended to go to the UK for further study when you were actually going to have his child?" She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, tracing paths through the paleness of her skin. "When I came back, I wanted to tell you so many times," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "But I saw how hard you were working, how much you were sacrificing for the business. I didn't want to add to your burden." "Then why?" I pressed, the accusations pouring out now. "Why did you keep seeing him? Why the monthly payments? Why did you keep this secret going for years?" At first, she hesitated again, wringing her hands. "It was just to make sure the child was okay. that he was being well cared for. Later, she trailed off, her gaze drifting away. Later, I couldn't let go. Leo, he's very smart. And he was always so incredibly happy to see me. Rage boiled in my veins. So all those years, your so-called business trips, the late nights, working overtime, they were all lies? You were going to see him. She lowered her head, a silent admission that spoke volumes. I shot up from the sofa, the sudden movement jarring the quiet room. I walked purposefully towards the bedroom, pulling open the closet door and starting to pack a suitcase. She scrambled after me, her steps hurried and panicked. Ethan, please listen to me. There's really nothing between David and me. It was only that one time. Leo, he's just a responsibility to me, not a romantic relationship. Why are you so hung up on this? I stopped, holding a folded shirt in my hand, and looked at her, disbelief etched across my face. Responsibility? I repeated, the word tasting foul on my tongue. Eleanor, do you even hear what you're saying? That's your biological son. How can you possibly disentangle responsibility from feeling when it comes to your own child? I turned back to my packing, tossing clothes into the case with frustrated movements. What have we been doing all these years? You hid this from me. You maintained a secret relationship behind my back, and you're trying to make it sound like some minor detail. It's not like that, she cried, her voice desperate, tears streaming down her face. The person I love, it's always been you. It's never changed. Leo is just enough. I roared, slamming the suitcase shut. I need time to think, to be alone. I dragged the heavy suitcase towards the front door. She grabbed my arm, her fingers tight around my forearm. At least tell me where you're going. The company has dorms, I said curtly, shaking off her hand. I walked out the door, closing it softly behind me, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. In that moment, I felt an unprecedented sense of liberation, a heavy weight lifted. But immediately, a profound, aching loss settled in. 12 years of marriage, shattered, just like that. When I woke up the next morning in the sterile company dorm room, my phone showed over 20 missed calls. They were all from Eleanor. There was also a text message from an unknown number. Leo's birthday is next week. David will bring him to the city. If you're willing, you can meet him. I deleted the message instantly and blocked her number. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to see him. A few days later, my father-in-law called. Ethan, he said, his voice sounding slightly annoyed. What's all this about? Eleanor told me everything. Why are you two suddenly fighting like this? Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Your daughter hid from me for 10 years that she had another man's child. Anyone would have trouble accepting that. Young people make mistakes, he said dismissively, his tone clearly indicating he didn't see this as a big deal. You've been married for so long. It's just about a child, isn't it? It's not like she had an affair. She was just helping a friend out. To end the marriage over this. Isn't that making too much of a fuss? I was speechless for a moment, struggling to process his perspective. In my father-in-law's eyes, Eleanor's actions weren't considered cheating. Concealing a child born from another relationship for a decade was just helping a friend out. Dad, I finally managed to say, I need time to think. After hanging up, the anger surged again. It wasn't just Eleanor, it was the blatant dismissal from her family. Did everyone think it was a small thing for a wife to hide giving birth to another man's child, keeping contact for years, and concealing it for a decade? Lost in thought, my phone rang again. It was a video call request from Eleanor. After a moment of hesitation, I accepted. Her face filled the screen, haggard and drawn. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying. Ethan, she choked out, tears welling up again. I was wrong. She sobbed softly. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. I shouldn't have made that decision on my own. But I beg you, please give me one chance. Let me make it up to you. I remained silent, watching her, my expression unreadable. About Leo, she continued, her voice gaining a fragile determination. I can handle it. I'll reduce how often I see him. Only when it's absolutely necessary. Listen to yourself, I interrupted, unable to contain my disbelief. What do you mean, you'll handle him? Are you planning to discard him like some unwanted item? She froze, her eyes widening in surprise. I thought you didn't want me to see him anymore. The issue was never the child, I said, raising my voice, the frustration and hurt breaking through my composure. It was your deception. 12 years. Eleanor, you lied to me for 12 years. Tears streamed down her face. I know I was wrong, Ethan. I truly do. But what will I do without you? You should first ask yourself. I said, my voice hardening. What you would do without that child. I ended the call. For the next few days, I buried myself in work, using the relentless demands of the business as a shield against my turbulent emotions. I moved into a hotel near the office, a conscious physical separation, refusing any contact with Eleanor or anyone connected to her. That Saturday, I was at the office as usual, working overtime. In the afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. It's Leo's birthday today. He really hopes you can come. I stared at the message for a moment, then threw the phone onto the desk, trying to force myself to focus on the documents spread before me. But for some reason, a small, persistent voice in my mind kept urging me to go, just to take a quick look. Eventually, curiosity, or perhaps something else I couldn't define, won out over reason. I decided to go, just to see him, from a distance, and then leave. When I arrived at the address, a building in Emerald Lake Gardens, the same high-end apartment from the detective's report, I sat in my car for a long time, debating whether to even get out. Finally, I pulled a face mask and a baseball cap from my car and put them on, deciding to observe anonymously. From just outside the open door, I could see into the apartment. The living room was decorated with streamers and balloons. A dozen children were gathered together, and in the center stood a tall, thin boy. It must be Leo Hayes. He looked remarkably like Eleanor, with the same bright eyes and straight nose. Eleanor stood near the cake, a smile on her face, but her eyes held a weariness and worry that even the festive atmosphere couldn't mask. David Lynn was also there, moving around gracefully, greeting guests. He looked gentle and refined. Just as I was steeling myself to leave, ready to fade back into the anonymous afternoon, Leo suddenly spoke, his clear voice cutting through the cheerful din. "Wait a moment," he said, holding up a slice of cake he hadn't touched. "I want to save a piece of cake for a very special person." The living room quieted down. Everyone looked at him curiously. "My mom's husband, my Uncle Ethan," Leo announced, his voice filled with sincerity. "Even though he can't be here today, I hope one day I can meet him. I want to tell him in person how much I admire him." Eleanor stared at her son, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. David walked over and put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "That's very thoughtful, Leo. You're a good boy." I stood just outside the door, my heart pounding, profoundly shaken by the boy's unexpected words. I was still reeling, debating whether to step in, when a man with a camera suddenly appeared from around the corner, pushed the door open, and entered the room. I recognized him instantly. It was the private detective I had hired. A commotion quickly erupted inside. Through the open doorway, I saw the detective taking pictures frantically. Eleanor was trying to stop him, while David shielded Leo protectively. "Who are you?" David demanded, his voice sharp and wary. "Why are you breaking into my home?" "Someone hired me," the detective replied mockingly, his camera clicking. "Just here to take some photos." "Such a touching scene. Does your wife know you have a son out here?" It hit me then. The detective had completely misunderstood the situation. To an outsider, seeing David, Leo, and Eleanor together would look exactly as he assumed. David had a secret son from an affair, and Eleanor was the mistress being integrated into the family. David's face went white with anger. "What nonsense are you talking about? Get out immediately." "Am I wrong?" the detective challenged, looking directly at Eleanor now. "Eleanor, you're Ethan Miller's wife, but you had a son with David Lynn? Isn't that called cheating?" Leo was clearly stunned by the detective's words. He looked at his mother, his eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, what is he saying?" I couldn't stand it any longer. I pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. "That's enough," I said, my voice cold and firm, addressing the detective directly. "You're fired. Delete all the photos, then leave." Silence fell over the room. Everyone stared at me, surprised by my sudden appearance. The detective, looking sheepish, nodded and hurried out. I looked around. The children were watching me with wide, frightened eyes. Eleanor was staring, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief, as if she couldn't believe I was actually here. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, feeling incredibly awkward. I seemed to have interrupted. I started to turn to leave. "Uncle Ethan, wait." Leo suddenly called out, his voice ringing out clearly despite the earlier shock. Are you Uncle Ethan? Mom's husband?" I stopped and turned back, nodding slowly. A bright smile bloomed on the boy's face. "It is you. That's wonderful. I've always wanted to meet you. Can you stay and have some cake? I saved a piece especially for you." I couldn't bring myself to refuse the child's enthusiastic invitation outright. I managed a small, strained smile. "Thank you, Leo. That's very kind. But I think your mom and dad might have some things they need to talk about with you. Maybe I can come visit you another day? How about that? Leo's smile faded slightly. Do you hate me? No, not at all. I quickly reassured him. This is just something for the adults to work out. It has nothing to do with you. David stepped forward, smoothly taking charge. Kids, he said, his voice gentle. The party's still on. Why don't we all go play some games in the garden? Under David's direction, the children filed out, leaving just the three of us in the suddenly quiet living room. An awkward silence settled between us. Finally, David spoke, his tone apologetic. Mr. Miller, we truly didn't think this through properly. It was my request back then. Eleanor, she only helped me out of sympathy. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes pleading. Ethan, I really just wanted to help him fulfill his father's last wish. I never expected things to turn out this way. I took a deep breath. The problem isn't the initial intention, I said, my voice firm but no longer openly angry. The problem is the deception. For 10 years, you maintained this relationship behind my back, never once considering telling me the truth. We were wrong, David admitted, his gaze steady. But please believe us, there was truly nothing between Eleanor and me after that one time. Everything since has only been for the child. I looked at Eleanor. Then why? Why the regular money transfers? Why the frequent visits? Because. She hesitated, looking down. Because I am his mother, after all. I couldn't completely abandon him. I shook my head slowly. If you've accepted that identity, that responsibility of being his mother, then why continue to deceive me? Why keep me in the dark for so long? Eleanor had no answer. Tears welled up again and spilled down her face. David sighed. Mr. Miller, he said, his tone grave. If you wish, I can take Leo and move abroad. We can stay out of your lives, not cause any more trouble. No, Eleanor cried out, her voice sharp with sudden panic. You can't take Leo. Seeing the strength of Eleanor's reaction, I felt a bitter sadness. It seems, I said softly, looking at her, you've already made your choice. I turned and began to walk towards the door. Eleanor rushed after me, grabbing my arm again. Ethan, it's not like that. I don't want Leo to be without a mother. The person I love. It's always been you. It's never changed. Eleanor, I said, my voice gentle but final. We're done. I gently but firmly released her hand. I'll contact my lawyer. We'll prepare the divorce papers. I walked out, not looking back at her heartbroken face. A week later, the lawyer delivered the initial draft of the divorce agreement. I glanced through it quickly, signing the proposed property division. The company's shares remained mine. The 2 houses and most of the cash went to Eleanor. My friend, Daniel, saw the agreement and was incredulous. Are you crazy? He exclaimed. This is completely unfair to you. The houses were bought by her parents in the first place. I replied, my voice detached. And a large portion of that money is hers, earned over the years. I'm just taking back what's mine, what I built. In my mind, I was trying to make it a clean break, a purely business transaction, devoid of the emotional mess. Just the day before the divorce was due to be finalized, I received an unexpected call. Uncle Ethan, a small voice said, can I see you? Just me. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed. The boy was thinner than I remembered, with faint dark circles under his eyes. Mom has been very sad lately, Leo said, getting straight to the point when we met. She barely smiles anymore and doesn't eat much. I didn't know how to respond, swallowed by a sudden wave of guilt. My dad told me the truth. The boy continued, his gaze steady. He said, back then, he asked Mom to help him have me because my grandpa was dying and wanted to see a grandchild. I nodded. Your dad was right. Then why are you divorcing Mom? Leo asked, his forehead furrowed in confusion. Wasn't she just being kind and helping my dad? I sighed, trying to figure out how to explain the complexities of the adult world to this insightful child. Leo, the issue wasn't the intention. I said gently, it was the hiding. Your mom should have told me about this before we got married, not kept it a secret for 10 years. The boy pondered this for a moment. If Mom had told you back then, he asked, looking up at me, would you have agreed? The question stopped me cold. If Eleanor had been honest a decade ago, what would I have done? Would I have understood and supported her, or would I have refused outright? I don't know. I admitted honestly, but at least I would have had the right to make my own choice. Leo nodded thoughtfully. I see. Just like I had the right to know you existed, you had the right to know I existed. I was taken aback by the boy's maturity and perception. Yes, That's exactly it. Uncle Ethan, Leo lowered his voice, speaking confidentially. I want to tell you something. Actually, for years ago, I peeked at her phone and saw your pictures and information. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. You never told her? The boy shook his head. I didn't want to make her sad. And I was always curious about what kind of person you were. Mom said you were really smart, that you built a big company, and that you were the best person she had ever met. A strange warmth spread through my chest. Eleanor talked about me like that to her son? Uncle Ethan, Leo continued, his voice earnest. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I hope you can reconsider. Mom really loves you. I can see the light in her eyes whenever she talks about you. The boy's words left me deep in thought. I drove Leo home, and we talked a lot during the ride, about everything from school to his hobbies. I found him smart, considerate, and mature beyond his years. When we reached the apartment building, I asked, Do you want to come up? Leo shook his head. No, thank you for meeting with me. I hope I can talk with you again soon. Watching the boys retreating back, a slight shift occurred within my heart. That night, I received a message from Eleanor. Thank you for agreeing to see Leo. He came back very happy and said you had a great chat. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete the message either. I called my lawyer the next day and requested that the divorce proceedings be temporarily halted. I decided to go abroad for a while, to give myself the space I needed to think clearly, away from the pressures and emotions of home. I need 3 months, I told Eleanor. I'll make a decision when I come back. Eleanor nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. I'll wait for you, she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. The months abroad passed quickly. I focused on scouting new markets, exploring new projects, deliberately pushing the issues of my marriage and Eleanor's secret to the back of my mind. 3 months later, on the flight back home, I received a message. Leo was sick and had been hospitalized. Hesitating only a moment, I headed straight to the hospital. In the hospital room, Leo lay in bed, his face pale. Eleanor and David sat on either side of the bed, both looking exhausted and worried. Seeing me, Eleanor's eyes lit up with surprise and a flicker of hope, while David gave a polite nod of acknowledgement. Uncle Ethan, Leo said weakly, a small smile on his face. You're back. Heard you weren't well, I said, walking to the side of his bed. Are you feeling better? The boy nodded. The doctor said it's nothing serious. I should be able to leave in a few days. David stood up. I'll go get some fruit, he said, sensing the moment, and quietly left the room. An awkward silence settled between the three of us, until Leo, with surprising directness, spoke up again. Uncle Ethan, have you thought about it? Are you still going to divorce Mom? I hadn't expected the boy to be so blunt. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Eleanor quickly interjected. Leo, this is adult business. Don't ask about it. But it concerns me too, Leo insisted, looking earnest. If you divorce, I won't get to see Uncle Ethan anymore. The boy's words struck a chord deep within me. For the past 3 months, this was the question I had been turning over and over in my mind. If Eleanor hadn't deceived me, would I have grown to care for this intelligent, thoughtful child? Leo, even if your mother and I divorce, I said truthfully, my voice gentle. If you want to see me, I'll always make time for you. The boy's eyes brightened. Really? You don't hate me? Of course not, I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my lips. You're a good boy, Leo. Anyone would like you. Eleanor watched our interaction, tears welling up in her eyes again. Then, can you forgive Mom? Leo pressed, looking between us. She really loves you. I can feel it. Eleanor's face flushed. Leo, stop it, she murmured, embarrassed. Looking at Eleanor's flushed face and the vulnerability in her eyes, much of the anger I had carried for months began to dissipate. The 3 months of quiet reflection had helped me understand that no one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is whether they can recognize their errors and sincerely try to change. We need time, I said, looking at Eleanor, my voice softer than it had been in months. But I'm willing to give us a chance. To try again. Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief, then flooding with hope. Really? She whispered. I nodded. But we need to start over, I said, my gaze holding hers. Based on honesty and trust. Leo clapped his hands together, beaming. That's great. Uncle Ethan, you're the best. When David returned with the fruit, he saw the shift in the room's atmosphere and smiled knowingly. He placed the fruit on the table and quietly excused himself, leaving the three of us to begin our tentative journey towards healing. The days that followed were not easy. Eleanor and I began the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding trust, brick by painstaking brick. Leo became the unexpected bridge between us, the boy's intelligence and kindness gradually softening the hardened edges of my resentment and winning my heart. About a year later, at Leo's suggestion, the three of us went to an animal shelter and adopted a small dog. Watching the boy and the puppy play together in the garden, their laughter echoing softly in the afternoon air, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that had been missing for a long time. Eleanor leaned against me, her voice soft. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us a second chance." I put my arm around her shoulder, drawing her closer. "Everyone deserves a second chance," I said, my voice warm. "The key is to cherish it." We looked at each other, our eyes meeting, filled with a newfound tenderness and understanding. That weekend, I drove Eleanor and Leo to the countryside for a picnic. Leo sat in the back seat, excitedly recounting stories from school, his voice bubbling with youthful energy. Eleanor occasionally turned around, her eyes shining with maternal love. I glanced at Leo in the rearview mirror, a warmth spreading through my heart. Over the past year, I had slowly accepted the child's presence, and now I even found myself enjoying the time I spent with him. Leo was smart and considerate, always sensing the adult's moods, knowing when to lighten the atmosphere and when to quietly retreat. When we reached our destination, we spread out the picnic blanket and enjoyed the delicious food Eleanor had carefully prepared. After eating, Leo dragged me off to fly a kite. We ran across the grassy field, our laughter carried away on the breeze. Eleanor sat in the shade of a tree, watching us, a happy smile on her face. She took out her phone and quietly captured the moment. On the drive home, Leo fell asleep in the back seat. Eleanor turned her head and spoke softly to me. "Ethan, thank you," she whispered. I reached over and took her hand in mine. "What are you thanking me for?" "For your tolerance," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "For your understanding. I know how difficult this past year has been for you, accepting another man's child, dealing with the gossip and whispers from friends and family." I gently shook my head. "Leo is a good kid," I said. "He deserves to be loved. As for what other people think, that's their business, not ours." Eleanor leaned closer, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm so lucky to have you." Unfortunately, our peaceful days weren't destined to last long. 3 months later, David Lynn unexpectedly showed up at my office. "Mr. Miller, sorry to intrude," he said, his face drawn. It was clear he had something serious to discuss. "Have a seat, David. What can I do for you?" I motioned for him to sit down. David hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke. "I'm going to the United States for work. It might be for several years. I plan to take Leo with me." My brow furrowed. Why the sudden decision to go to the U.S.? "The Hayes Group is establishing a branch office in the U.S., David explained. "They need me to head the finance department there. And the education environment in the States is better than here. It would be beneficial for Leo's growth." "Have you discussed this with Eleanor?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. David shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. After all," I understood his hesitation. If Leo moved to the U.S., the relationship Eleanor and I had so painstakingly rebuilt would face another significant challenge, a long-distance strain that could unravel everything. "David," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "I respect your decision as a father. But Eleanor is Leo's mother. You absolutely have to discuss this with her and get her input." David nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm worried she'll be heartbroken." I paused, considering his words. "Let me think about it," I said. "I'll give you a response tomorrow." That evening, I told Eleanor about David's plans. Her face paled instantly. "No," she exclaimed, her voice panicked. "Leo can't go to the U.S. It's so far. How will I see him?" "But David is his father," I reasoned, trying to approach it logically. "He has the right to have Leo live with him. And the education in the U.S. is better." "But," Eleanor's eyes were filled with a desperate struggle. "He's only 11. He still needs his mother's care. We can visit him often," I suggested. "Flights to the U.S. are only about 10 hours now." Eleanor shook her head, tears starting to fall. "It's not the same, Ethan. Do you know how painful it is for a mother not to see her child grow up, day by day?" I fell silent, a heavy weight settling in my chest. I suddenly remembered my own rage and pain a year ago upon discovering the truth in the slow, difficult process of accepting Leo. What Eleanor was facing now felt incredibly similar to what I had gone through. Forcing her to be separated from her son, no matter the circumstances of his birth, would be a cruel blow. The next day, I met David at a coffee shop. "David," I said, my voice firm. "Eleanor and I have discussed it. We hope Leo can stay here." David frowned. "But this decision, I know it might seem unreasonable from a practical standpoint," I admitted, "but please, try to understand it from a mother's perspective. For 10 years, Eleanor has been trying to balance her responsibilities. To suddenly take away the chance for her to be involved in Leo's daily life, it would be too cruel for her." David was silent for a long time, weighing my words. Finally, he nodded. "I understand. I will try to fight for a position here in the domestic branch." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for understanding, David." However, things were not that simple. 2 days later, David came to see me again, his expression even more strained than before. "I tried my best," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "But the company is insistent that I go to the US. If I refuse, I'll likely lose my job." I frowned. "It's that serious?" David nodded. "The Hayes Group isn't doing well right now. They're restructuring. As the financial director, I have access to a lot of sensitive internal information. They can't afford to keep me here, and they absolutely can't let me go to a competitor." I thought for a moment. "If Leo stays here," I asked, "what arrangements can be made for him?" "My parents are getting old," David sighed. "They wouldn't be able to take care of him full-time. Unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless Eleanor could be more involved in taking care of Leo." "But would that affect your relationship?" David asked, looking genuinely concerned now. A small smile touched my lips. After everything we had been through, after seeing Eleanor's pain and the sincerity of her desire to be a mother to Leo, I knew the answer. "Don't worry, David," I said. "We can handle it." When I got home, I explained the situation to Eleanor. "David has to go to the US," I told her, watching her reaction. "But he's agreed that Leo can stay here. However, you'll need to take on more responsibility for his care." Eleanor's eyes widened, her face flooding with relief and joy. "Really?" she whispered, her voice trembling. You won't mind?" I shook my head, reaching for her hand. "Over the past year," I said, my voice gentle, "I've grown used to Leo being around. He's a good kid. I won't mind taking on more responsibility for him." Eleanor threw her arms around me, holding me tightly. "Ethan, thank you," she cried, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I don't know how to thank you enough." I held her close, stroking her hair. "You don't need to thank me," I said. "I'm just doing what a husband should do, taking care of his family." That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I wasn't a saint. Deep down, a small part of me still carried the weight of the past, the betrayal. But seeing Eleanor's unbridled happiness, knowing that I had eased her burden and brought peace to her heart, it felt worth it. Every bit of discomfort, every lingering doubt, seemed a small price to pay for her joy and for the possibility of a different future. Before David left for the US, he came to my office one last time to thank me. "Mr. Miller, I am truly grateful for your understanding and generosity," David said, his tone sincere and heartfelt. "I will send money regularly to cover Leo's living and education expenses. If there's anything you need at all, please don't hesitate to contact me." I nodded. "David, we both want Leo to grow up happy and healthy. That's our shared responsibility now." After David left, Leo moved into the house with Eleanor and me. At first, I wasn't entirely used to the presence of another person in the quiet routine Eleanor and I had built over the years. But Leo was intuitive and well-behaved. He quickly integrated into our home. The first day Leo moved in, I helped him arrange his room. The boy looked a little hesitant as he asked, "Uncle Ethan, do you really not mind me living here?" I ruffled his hair gently. "Of course I don't mind, Leo. There are plenty of rooms, and honestly, having you here makes the house feel more lively." There were tears in his eyes as he said, "I promise I won't bother you or Mom. If you need anything done, just tell me." I knelt down so we were eye level. "Leo, you don't need to try to please me," I said, looking into his bright eyes. "You just need to be yourself. Be happy and healthy. That's all your mom and I want." Leo unexpectedly threw his arms around me, hugging me tightly. In that moment, the last lingering fragment of resentment, the final knot of doubt, seemed to dissolve in my heart. 6 years later, when Leo was 16, an unexpected tragedy changed everything. David Lynn was in a car accident in the United States and passed away. When the news reached us, Leo didn't speak for 3 days, shutting himself away in his room. Eleanor and I took turns sitting outside his door, unsure how to comfort the teenager who had just lost his biological father. Finally, Leo opened his door. His eyes were red and swollen. He had clearly been crying for a long time. "Uncle Ethan," he said, his voice hoarse. "Mom." Leo's gaze was steady, despite the grief. "I want to go to the United States," he said, "to attend Dad's funeral." I immediately made the arrangements. The three of us flew to the U.S. together and attended David's funeral. Throughout the process, Leo was incredibly composed, showing a strength beyond his years. He only finally broke down and cried during the final farewell. After returning home, Leo seemed to have grown even more mature. One evening, he came to find me, holding a document in his hand. "Uncle Ethan, I have a request," Leo said, his expression serious. I want to change my last name. To yours. To Miller." I looked at the teenager, surprised. "Why do you suddenly want to change your name?" "Because," he said, his voice full of sincerity, "all these years, you're the one who has taken care of me, who has loved me. In my heart, you are already my father." I was deeply moved, but I kept my voice calm. "Leo, this is a big decision. Are you sure this isn't something you're doing impulsively because of the grief of losing your father?" Leo shook his head firmly. "It's not impulse. I've thought about this for a long time. Dad's passing, it just made me certain. Do you accept me?" "Of course, I accept you," I said, smiling genuinely. "But we need to ask your mother first." When Eleanor heard about Leo's decision, she cried uncontrollably. She hugged her son, asking repeatedly, "Are you sure? Your father, he would." Leo gently wiped away his mother's tears. "Mom, Dad would understand. He's watching over us from heaven, and I know he only wants us to be happy." And so, Leo officially changed his surname to Miller. This change felt like the symbol of a true new beginning. The relationship between the three of us grew even closer, solidified. We were finally, truly, a family. The end.